Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sportsball Podcast. I am your host, Zach, along with my co-hosts, Andy and Nate, and we are here to talk all things sports. If it has a ball and it's related to sports, we're going to discuss it, or at least we're going to try. There's a lot of sports out there that we probably will never touch upon, but we're going to try. We're gonna do all the sports, and so. Yeah, this is our first episode of this. For those that might have followed us from the Nebraska abilities, it's going to be the same thing as that, but now talking about everything that at least we find interesting that we have a little bit of knowledge in. I don't foresee us talking about things like lacrosse or stuff like that, but hey, we might try.
Sorry, NASCAR.
Hey, hold on. I mean, that one could be on there.
It could be, but it doesn't have a ball, so we'll have to talk to some people about it.
Well, I don't know anything about cars, but don't they have like ball bearings? Would that technically count?
Ooh.
There you go. But
I'll talk to my people.
So we are. This is our whatever you call that, the first episode of the podcast, the
pilot
or whatever, the pilot. Yeah, there we go. So we're expanding Nebraska abilities into all sports, and so I figure maybe a little bit of background of who we are. If you don't know who we are big sports fans, and as we'll kind of give you the background as we go through the sports, kind of all focused on the sport as it's going on. So like right now we're in NFL playoff season and NBA, so like we're going to talk about those sports kind of primarily, and then like the college side of things as well. But yeah, so I will let you guys get any input before we get started on anything, because this intro is all over the place right now, but we're all about it. Yep. We're all about that. We do it live mentality.
No, this is a podcast about sportsball for sports ballers, and we'll just kind of have a roundtable discussion on anything that interests us, and hopefully it will interest you listeners and viewers as well. If you're watching this, Andy is currently watching the Nebraska ball game.
I am in a battle for my emotions right now.
That's all right.
But
like yeah, said, we do it live.
Like Zach said, we just wanted to give the people just more of our general thoughts outside of just focusing solely on Nebraska. And yeah, we're still going to talk about, Nebraska-based sports, because, that's what our first rooting interest came from, for sure. But it's nice to be able to expand and kind of include all sports at the same time of doing what we love to do. And like Zach said, just talk about sports, talk about our favorite teams, how mad they make us, and how driven that we are to cheer for them despite how mad and sad they make us. But at the end of the day, it's sports. It's what we love. And like Zach said, we're, winding down on the sad football season that I am very much not happy that it's going to be over. But we're in the thick of the NFL playoffs, and I think we can jump right into that, Zach, we'll just kind of focus on the playoffs and kind of towards the end of the regular season of, this coaching carousel that we've been going through, for sure. But, this past weekend, we had the wild card weekend where, we really, I think the Dallas Green Bay game was probably the biggest shock to everybody. I would also say right behind that probably would be the Texans Browns, just because, the Browns still had a pretty stout defense the entire season. And then the Texans just came out and just absolutely walloped them. You didn't know Joe Flacco has been good kind of down the stretch, but then, he's kind of come back and just shows that his age probably caught up to him a little bit during that playoff game. As the Texans won that game. And then, you had the frigid cold Miami Kansas City game. And obviously, if you know me and know my fandom, that I am not a big Chiefs fan. So it's much to my disliking that the Chiefs continue to somehow they have a very average season. They had a lot of ups and downs, and yet here they are, one win again away from the conference championship game and being back closer to the Super Bowl, and it's just maddening and frustrating. But with that, I won't dive too much into the Philly Tampa game. I'll kind of save that for Zach's, our Eagles correspondent here. I'm not sure how much you'll want to talk about either, but yeah, I think overall, just another great NFL season. Regardless, it's kind of been an ups and downs. We thought, well, I guess outside of our teams, who we root for. If you take away that fact and you look, the 10,000-foot view, then yes, it was a good NFL season. But it was kind of a storyline of, Miami looked like they were probably going to be the top team throughout the entire season, and same with Philadelphia. And then just, both teams kind of hit the halfway point, and then all of a sudden just tanked on both sides. I mean, Miami basically had the AFC, East secured. They fall, and then the Buffalo comes and rises from the dead and wins the division, and vice versa for Philly. I mean, Philly had the NFC Beast locked up, tanked the last 7. What'd you guys lose? The last 6 to 7 games,
including the playoff game. Yeah, they were 1-6 in the last stretch.
Yeah,
which is
It
ridiculous.
was. Yeah, you lose that many games. You allow Dallas to hang around, come back, win the division again. And obviously we just saw how the Dallas Green Bay game went, and boy, that
technically though, as the Philly fan here, thanks to the Cowboys losing, Philly's season lasted longer than the Cowboys did. I mean, that's totally a technicality.
Right.
Just, that's how the schedule lined up. But still, it was nice for a couple days.
Right.
And I even texted you guys, though, like during the Philly, like before Philly and Tampa played, I was like, I expect them to lose. The way they'd been playing the last 2 months, it was like, yeah, if they eke out a win, great. Then they go on to, at that point, it would be Detroit and probably get walloped. So it's like, there were much bigger issues that's big news for probably someday in the future, whenever that 30 for 30 comes out on that season. Yeah, it's been a I don't know if I'd call it boring playoff season. Not so far, like not season, but like just a very, very one-sided, almost, if you will, playoffs.
There were a lot of blowouts.
Yeah, it was either
like
it was
the Lions Rams was the closest game.
Yeah, that was probably the most.
That was kind of surprising,
game.
But
yeah, and
yeah,
so then
else was...
I mean, I think for a different term of excitement, I guess you've got Detroit, like you said, Detroit being the most exciting, but then they finally won a playoff game after, was it 32 years? Something like that. So more than 3 decades, which is wild. So I mean, that's, now that Philly's out of it, that's probably the team I'm gonna root for. Just because, Dan Campbell seems like a pretty cool guy. Yeah, the Miami Chiefs game. I think my favorite thing about that game wasn't even the game itself. It had to be the lead up to it, where Tua came out and said, cold, it's a mindset thing. And as most of us here in the Midwest I've definitely found out over this last weekend, that you can be outside all you want. It sometimes isn't a mentality thing. It's just cold. It's very cold. And it was. Nate, you don't get to say yep, because you're in California.
I do.
I guess
I lived
fair.
in a place that wasn't California for a while, and it got a little chilly there too.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair.
I still get to hold that badge of honor, but yeah, I don't know. It's been a weird NFL season, but it seems like, I mean, yeah, you have your couple of, perennial teams, but there seems like there's a lot of newcomers. I mean, you got the Texans, the Ravens are not like crashing into the finish line this year. The Lions are having to surprise everyone. And a lot of different stories. I'm not going to name that other team in the North that's somehow still in the playoffs.
It's very unfair that they somehow find a generational quarterback again.
Yep.
I still maintain that we have to wait and see how they play against San Fran this weekend, because that's going to be the real test. If he pulls off the same thing that he did against Dallas, I'm convinced.
I refuse to remain convinced until further notice, but
you may be biased.
I have a slight reason against that, but yeah, I mean, like I said, you have your usual teams. I mean, Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, and I mean, everyone knew they're at least going to be in the playoffs, and they have the players that have that experience to, just kind of carry your team at least a game or two in. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. But it's nice to see some of that new blood and see some teams that are actually. I mean, even the Dolphins they lost their first round game, but I mean they made the playoffs and had a solid season, and seem like they're at least trying to build something out there. So it's been an interesting season. Again, like Andy said, not for some of our teams, but next year is going to be the year for not mediocrity. Hopefully,
don't start turning into Dallas fans now. This year's, don't be this year our year too much.
I'm not saying our year. I'm just saying not hopefully as bad of a year.
Oh no, I don't think so. I think you'll be all right.
As long as the turf monster stays away, I think we'll be okay.
Well, so for this weekend, for playoff games, we've got Green Bay going against San Fran on Saturday at 8:15 Eastern time, which would not be, well, it's totally different for all of us because Nate's on the other side of the world. But and then we got Tampa Bay playing Detroit. I'll be honest. I think this one's going to come down. I do think that San Francisco and Detroit are going to come out on top in those games.
Yeah, that's how
I agree.
Too.
I think Green Bay looked really good against Dallas, but I think Dallas, much like Philadelphia, as much as it pains me to say it, were a bit fraudulent there throughout the back half of the year. Maybe not so much Dallas. Dallas looked somewhat strong in the regular season up until the playoff game. So, Philly did not. And then in the AFC, we've got Houston against Baltimore and the Chiefs against the Bills. Now, this is where it could get interesting because, I mean, anything's possible in the NFL, but I don't see the Texans beating the Ravens. The Ravens have just been on a tear this year, and however, I do think this is the year that the Bills finally get the Chiefs. I think the Bills' offense is going to be able to score more points than the Chiefs because the Chiefs have not looked like their normal high-powered offense that they normally have. Like I think Andy said, kind of not an off year, but
it's not as what you would think from the Chiefs, knowing their what they're supposed to be and everything. I mean, yeah, the receivers have probably been their biggest issue this year. A lot of games that they lost off drop passes, all of that, and then yet they kind of somehow just you win the games that you need to win to stay alive. It just at that point it's just get to the playoffs, see what happens, and they probably thankfully drew Miami the first round, where they're not good in cold weather games, but that's what it is, and I'm just prepared for, like I said, the Chiefs to probably make it back to the Super Bowl again because it happens. Just happens. It's what the Chiefs do. They're really good at it, so yeah, that's what it is. But I think the AFC matchups can go both ways. For sure, the Ravens is obviously, you look at the 1 seed, they're high-powered offense, but I mean the Texans are no pushover either. I mean, if they come out like they did, last week, especially on offense, just high-powered, they had 2 pick sixes or 1 pick six, but I mean, they had a couple of good big defensive turnovers. I mean, that can easily, sway the game like it did last week for them, for sure. And then, the Chiefs and Bills rematch again. I know the Bills if I remember right, they kind of won on a no call pass interference that probably could have been called both ways last time they played. But rematch of that game, I don't think we're going to have the same theatrics as we had at that overtime a couple of years ago when they were in the playoffs. But it's just slightly different defense or offenses. I mean, Buffalo is pretty much the same, but obviously Kansas City. But Kansas City knows what they need to do, and they do it well. But I mean, that game is going to be. I think it's going to come down to can Buffalo limit their mistakes? Because you've seen the losses that they've had this year. I mean, that's turnovers plague them. Definitely just from. Obviously, when they played Denver, just quoting from that experience, I mean, Buffalo turned it over 4 times and, gave Denver a chance to hang around and win that game. It's definitely week 1 when they played the Jets. I mean, Josh Allen throwing 20, 30-yard bombs that are, or I guess more than that, but, throwing some of those that are just basically interception arm punts. But, yeah, I think that those games will just come down to, who makes the least amount of turnovers for sorry, we're going to overtime in Nebraska Rutgers, so another fun joyous emotion for me. But yeah, that's I think obviously I'm not going to pick the Chiefs. I'm not cheering for the Chiefs, but I just have a weird feeling that they're going to somehow make it back to the Super Bowl. I would like the Texans to kind of be the sneaky chaos upset seed, but it depends on which version of Lamar Jackson comes out for the Ravens too. The Ravens have a really good defense, but I mean those games where Lamar Jackson kind of turns into Josh Allen and you just kind of make mistakes can definitely hinder their offense a lot. So those would be very intriguing matchups. And then for the NFC, I think it's pretty much whoever can beat the 49ers at this point. They have 49ers outside those 3 weeks haven't really shown me much else that they are prone to losing a lot. So they had that 3-week bad stretch, and then they're like, okay, we got it out of our system. We're good now.
Yeah, they did this thing that other teams usually do as well, where when they have a bad stretch, they figure out a way to adjust to it. Mm-hmm. Going back to it, the Eagles did not do that. Really, really cool. Really awesome. But that said, the Packers do have a chance to do the funniest thing in the world this weekend, which would be, I don't like the Packers, but it would be funny. That I think might incite the most chaos, because that's the first game. No, it's not. Sorry, it's the second game of the weekend, but it's the first game in the NFC where if the Packers upset the 49ers, oh boy. Then all bets are off. At that point, I'm gonna be like, I don't even know, because clearly they'll have something figured out if they do that. But any given Sunday, I think with the Chiefs though too, this is different for them this year finally because they have to go on the road.
Yeah,
don't they?
It'll be at least for Mahomes, it'll be Mahomes' first playoff road game that he's been in his career. So that'll, definitely going to Buffalo is not a
Buffalo's not a slouch. Not a slouch.
It's going to be probably just as cold. I haven't looked at their forecast, but I don't think they're having any snow. But I still think it's going to be cold.
Yeah.
And Buffalo because it's Buffalo. But
it's Buffalo at the end of January. Yeah, yes, it'll be cold.
Yep. No slouch to go to Buffalo and play either. I think that's where they played last time this season too. I think it was at Buffalo in their last matchup. So, I mean, Kansas City's probably used to going to Buffalo, but yeah, it's higher stakes, playoff stakes, and players are different. It's not like one team has more experience over the other. I mean, these are pretty much identical teams that kind of meet in these circumstances every single year. It's just, Kansas City just has always prevailed, and I think that probably gives them the edge a little bit despite going on the road. It's just they've been here, they've done this before. Whether it's, their best team that they've had compared to last year, probably not, but it's still the Chiefs, it's still Patrick Mahomes, it's still Andy Reid. I mean, you can't ever count them out in any situation at all. But yeah, those are, I think, my predictions at least.
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Unless Nate's got some hot take.
That's not the Niners Ravens.
That's not the Niners Ravens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm I'm going Ravens Lions actually.
See, and then my fun matchup would be the Texans Lions.
Okay, yeah.
If it comes down to Texans Lions, I am gonna laugh so hard for the best. For the best,
really
that'd be the funniest. That'd be the funniest.
That'd be so.
matchup.
Yeah,
I do think the Lions could legit do it. So I mean, I'm not laughing on behalf of them. I think the Lions could legit make it. Out of all outside of the 49ers, I think they're the other ones that could do it. The Texans, though, that would be hilarious. They definitely showed up in the back half of the season.
Especially
I will
'cause
say
they would have to go to either the winner of the Chiefs Bills game too, so they'd have to win 2 playoff road games to get to the Super Bowl.
yes,
So.
and that's
any given Sunday, or in this case, any given Saturday as well.
that is the Lions Bills would also be a very fun matchup if that were to happen too. But yeah, it's a fun time to talk about other NFL teams that are not our teams in the playoffs,
especially lately, especially with how
Yeah, I think Zach. I mean, Nate and I had our groin kicks pretty early in weeks ago. Zach probably has had a constant groin kick, but it just kind of really came to full fruition recently.
Like I said, I was prepared. I was mentally prepared for a loss, but I was not mentally prepared for that bad of a loss. I was like, nah, it's gonna come down to
Baker Mayfield coming out game.
Yeah. And for those that are new, that have not listened to us before, me, Zach, is the Eagles fan, and you guys can introduce your teams. We should probably do that as we go through. Since this is a new podcast. I'm the Eagles fan.
Me, Andy, the Denver Broncos fan.
And I, Nate, love the Heartbreak Kids, the Minnesota Vikings.
You know what? And that's what, but this year is also 100% of a good example as to why I think I just like the sport of football in general, is because a team, like everybody at the beginning of the year was like, oh, the Eagles should be really good again. And there for a while, they were like, they were winning. It doesn't necessarily mean they were good, but they were winning. And then they just weren't. And it's like the parity that happens in the NFL is always, and football in general is always exciting to see, I think. But with that, though, there were also some fun little headlines that I figure we can kind of transition into. We'll get to the coaching carousel kind of at the end here, but I think my favorite headline that I saw today still has to be Colts owner Jim Irsay found unresponsive at his home in December.
And we just now found out about it.
So hilariously enough, though, so this popped up on my phone too when I saw it, and I was like, so as an Eagles fan, a lot of speculation's been happening that the Eagles are going to fire Nick Sirianni, which whatever, if that happens. But I was watching my phone like a hawk for that ESPN notification to come up. And so then when I saw an ESPN notification come up, I was like, oh, this must be it. And it was instead about Jim Irsay being unresponsive in December. And then it was like from TMZ. So I'm like, okay, so ESPN just decided we're just going to push this out, which is fine. But like, what? I didn't really read into the story. I felt like we had to talk about this because this is funny.
Yeah, no,
it's not really funny that it happened, but it's like
it's the fact that like, oh, it's January 17th, and like, yeah, this happened in December. So
yeah, if they were gonna tell us about it, I would have liked to know like in December, you know.
Right.
I think I've seen him on TV at games like in the past 2 weeks.
I just wonder like how did that get covered up? Because like usually stories like this don't get covered up. So how did that happen? Like, and I guess
all that money he was going to use to move the beached whales instead of paying Jonathan Taylor, he paid to cover up the story probably.
Man, he has.
Yeah, and I forgot that's how the season started. Was Jonathan Taylor was holding out.
I didn't realize that beached whales were such an issue in Indiana, but what do I know?
You know, a lot that we apparently don't know.
I don't remember seeing the ocean next to Indiana, but hey, I never was good at geography either. So.
I think, you know, if this was one of our own teams who like, if we've had our own beat writers that we'd follow, we might have like heard something about it. So I would be interested to see like if there was a Colts person that somewhat knew of the situation and just like kept it under wraps or anything like that. But I mean, it's a weird situation to, not talk about for forever.
But I feel like we would have heard about something after the fact too. It'd be like, I tried to report on this in December and nobody believed me. Like, I feel like that would have gained traction somewhere. This is just such a wild, thing in general. Like, I read this headline and I read it 4 times. I'm like, I'm so confused. Yeah. I don't understand. Far be it from me to understand anything about it, but my goodness. This kind of goes kind of into the coaching carousel thing, I guess, but we might as well just jump into that. Well, before that, the other big headline in terms of players now is Jason Kelce was reported after the game on Monday to be retiring by Adam Schefter and other NFL beat writers. And then I think today, so it wasn't so much today, it was recorded on Tuesday, came out today on their podcast that he is not officially retired. So he basically went the Tom Brady route where he said that he's going to do it on his time. He's going to make the decision on his time. He hasn't made the decision yet. He's mulling it over. Personally, as an Eagles fan, who I would also consider Jason Kelce my favorite Eagles player, or at least one of them, I would not be surprised if he does end up retiring. In terms of NFL years, he's old. In terms of NFL miles, he's got a lot. So, and he's, I quite frankly don't think at this point he has anything else to prove in terms of his football acumen or anything. And he's clearly got himself set up to go into the media afterwards. And he's got 3 kids that he can, finally be at home with and do his thing. So I wouldn't be surprised, but based on kind of how the coaching search or whatever happens in terms of that, however that goes for the Eagles, that he may retire, he may not. I wouldn't be surprised if he does, but highly competitive people like to go as long as they can. So there's probably not much else that you guys have for input there, but that was kind of just the other big headline that came out today. So to the coaching carousel side, though, the exciting one for me, maybe not so exciting, but we can just start with probably the biggest surprise, I thought at least, was Pete Carroll no longer going to be the head coach for the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of people might say like the Belichick thing was surprising, but that one had been talked about for the past like 2 months. I felt like where it was just kind of leading that way. The Pete Carroll one, totally by shock for me. I was like that, but he's still going to be part of the organization.
Yeah.
Which is what, I mean, it leads into the Belichick thing too, but that's kind of what I thought was going to happen with the Patriots too, is, they'll either force Belichick into retirement or like, obviously what they did is, let him go, but then Belichick is going to quietly kind of move behind the scenes, but that doesn't sound like that's what's happening with him, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that one shocks me for a different reason. The Belichick one surprises me because of that, what you just said, Andy. The Pete Carroll one surprised me because like a week before they announced it, he had said, I plan on still being the head coach.
Right.
But then he came out after all this. They must have had a discussion that week. And he said, well, I mean, he's getting old. I mean, he is. I think he's the oldest head coach in the NFL. He was, I guess, now. So, I mean, I guess I was more just surprised because I saw him being kind of like, just in terms of his tenure at a team, not anything else. I saw him like the Joe Paterno type. Like that's what he was going to die doing, was being the head coach.
Right.
Just that, not anything else.
USC was wild, man.
Let's see. Mike Tomlin asked by one of the writers in Pittsburgh about his future, just
then walked off.
That was hilarious.
Because it was a question about his contract, and he just walked off the podium.
He didn't even let them get it finished. He just walked
Nope.
off.
He heard the contract. He's like, I'm not getting myself fined, and walked off.
Smart.
Well, it sounds like he was telling players, I think it was either today or maybe it was yesterday, that he was telling players I don't know. This is my favorite thing when other like people say this. Like, he was telling his players, oh, I plan to be around. Well, yeah. Like, I can't imagine he would be like, yeah, I don't plan on being here next week.
Right.
Like I don't think many people that go into that are going to be telling people that unless they're just that unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the only other one that I guess was newsworthy as of right now is Mike McCarthy, and I guess also Nick Sirianni, both fan bases being very upset with their head coaches right now. Both as of right now, Mike McCarthy is officially staying with the Cowboys, and Nick
I was gonna
Sirianni,
say, as like
Another year.
a couple hours ago before we started recording.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Sirianni, so the tweet that we had all shared, or that was shared to our group, that one was followed up on saying that while they're still looking for coordinators, it does not confirm that Nick Sirianni is safe because he did not meet with the owner today, which was supposed to happen. So who knows? There's still a chance that he may get fired, but we'll see. So that should make next week's episode interesting. So either I'll be really happy or still here. So my team won't be in the playoffs regardless, so it isn't going to matter.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess we kind of already went over our team updates.
Just
They're not playing anymore.
No,
not playing. It's sad.
But that's not. We can move on to the NCAA and kind of tie that in with the other part of NFL, which is now the big speculation is Jim Harbaugh going to be? Is he going to be going to the NFL? Which is kind of, I think, the big.
Absolutely.
Is he? I think, yeah. I
He's already interviewed with like 3 or 4 teams, I think. And...
Which I think he did last year too, and then decided to stay with Michigan because I remember I think he interviewed for Minnesota as well.
Yeah, we said no, so then he went back to Michigan.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yep. So I'm guessing this time around. I mean, we'll see. Michigan seems like they're kind of running from some stuff, even though they just won a championship. But,
and that's the whole thing too. Is like, is this and part of Harbaugh knowing that like something's going to be coming down, at least for the NCAA, because the Big Ten already did kind of their punishment, but I don't think the NCAA has done anything on their end yet. So it's like, is he trying to get out before that happens? Will anything come out from the NCAA too? Who knows?
I know the NCAA commissioner or whatever came out and said that they won fair and square or something.
Which
not to worry about it. But
I guess that is
I don't know.
Another nugget. Michigan won the national championship. If nobody knows that by now,
if they're listening to our podcast but don't know that, it might be. I mean, glad we can provide you the information,
right?
And then to that,
by the way, one of those coaches isn't with the team anymore. The other one probably won't be with the team anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say, poor Washington is getting just.
I know, just
pummeled.
you're like, oh, you have all this momentum, ready to go into a new conference, and then the big news that I was kind of shocked by too was Nick Saban retiring. Then that whole coaching search happens. Kalen DeBoer, East Washington is now going to be following incredibly massive footsteps behind Saban. So,
I wouldn't want to do it, but if they're getting anyone to do it, he's got the moment.
He's got the momentum to do it. Yeah.
Right.
I think we had all talked about it too when Saban did. Well, first of all, Saban just retired. Like he just woke up one day and just decided like, I'm done.
Not anymore. Not for me.
Like what? And I think, going back to like the Joe Paterno example, he was one I thought also, again, in terms of just being on the field until he couldn't anymore. I was like, that is what Nick Saban's going to do. Like, that's just, that's what he is. He's going to be the head coach of Alabama until he passes away.
Yep.
Until he physically cannot do it anymore. And then apparently not. So, But I think we'd all talked about it too. Like with whoever follows up with Saban has almost an impossible job.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure coaching at Alabama will not be impossible because the name has been built up, but
The
most kids,
expectations
like,
along with it.
yeah, like if you don't win 10 games this next year at minimum, people are going to be calling for your head already, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous. But I mean, another example of, I think, a fan base with some ridiculous expectations might be like Ohio State. Like, they've won 11 to 12 games every year the past like 5-6 years, and their down year is 10 wins or whatever. And it's like, I get it. You're hiring, you need a coach that you want to win, but like, imagine as Nebraska fans, all three of us, if we were getting 10 wins a year at this point, we'd be like, hey, you know what? We aren't going to argue. But I say that we were also the same ones to get rid of Bo Pelini, who was taking us to those 9-10 win.
I didn't get rid of him. That was someone else.
Right.
That's also fair. We could sit here and argue about that till the sun comes up. Let's see. Speaking of Ohio State, they hired Ross Bjork from Texas A&M to be their new athletic director, which I thought was pretty surprising.
Good old Ted Carter leading that search as the Ohio State president. So I think that's his first major hire since he left Nebraska.
I don't know much about when it comes to like athletic directors, so I don't know if this is good, bad, otherwise, other than the whole thing with Jimbo Fisher in Texas A&M, but no. So that's just kind of so that's kind of the I don't know, the big Ohio State news. There isn't a whole lot, now that college football's over for the year, with other than coaching carousel, which outside of Nick Saban, there isn't really a whole heck of a lot else going on.
Next signing day, early February, right? Like the final signing day. Yeah.
To no surprise, quarterback J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum, or running back Blake Corum from Michigan, are entering the draft. Bound to go pretty high.
Yep. Baby Tua got his waiver denied to come back to for a 6th year of eligibility, so he's entering the draft out of spite, I guess.
I had wondered about that because when he said he was entering the portal to go play somewhere else, I was like, isn't he on like year 6 or something? Yeah, basically. And it's like, I guess, good luck.
Yep.
And I guess then for the Nebraska side of things for us, Nebraska hired Glenn Thomas as the quarterback coach and co-offensive coordinator, which I don't know anything about him other than he was at Pittsburgh this last year. But he has
he's coached with Roll at Baylor and Temple.
Yep.
And I never saved the tweet, but there was a stat that I saw like it listed as like, offensive ranks with like Satterfield as an offensive QB coach versus, Glenn Thomas now as an offensive QB coach. And it's like, it's very like 70 to 80 difference in rankings between, Glenn Thomas being the QB coach versus Satterfield being a QB coach types in terms of rankings. So it's definitely something we talked about, on our last podcast, that Nebraska needed to go out and do this offseason too. I don't think you can bring in, the most prized recruit in many recent Nebraska years and not have a dedicated quarterback coach to coach him. So that was definitely, I think, Nebraska's most important offseason hire in terms of trying to figure out what changes you need to make on the coaching staff. And we didn't think, any outside of like, extending Tony White or giving him a raise or anything like that. I don't think we expected much of changes to happen. Just because obviously a lot of things went wrong that offensive season, but at the same time, we knew this is not what Nebraska wanted to do going forward. We knew that they did not want to set up and run the option the entire rest of the rules tenure. There's definitely not something they wanted to do. And, obviously there's probably going to be play designs for Dylan to run the ball, but I don't think they don't want to make him a running quarterback like they did with Heinrich the entire season. So very, very important hire, and then Dana, I always forget how to say his last name.
Holgerson.
That I think that rumor is still in there. And at this point, if Nebraska does hire him, it'll just be an offensive analyst. Because I think, now with the QB coach and, they moved down the current tight end coach back to an offensive analyst because Satterfield's now going to coach tight ends while still being the main offensive coordinator. So your full-time coaching staff is now full. So, if Dana does come back on, he's just going to be an offensive analyst. But I think that's if Nebraska does get him, I think that's huge in terms of just having his experience on the offensive side. And it could be just him trying to get back into a head coaching job at some point too, after being off for so many years. But, I think that's what we have to look forward to in terms of coaches. I know Nebraska this past week, 2 weekends ago, or either this past weekend, it was 2 weekends ago. They had the list of transfer portal players on site on campus. Got 3 big recruits out of it, 2 wide receivers and a running back out of those portal additions. And I think the most productive one was the Wake Forest wide receiver Banks. He had 650 to 700 receiving yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns, 70 receptions last year at Wake Forest. So he's easily your most productive transfer coming in right off the bat.
I think the Texas guy, he got injured this year.
Yeah.
And I think he had a really good season with Wyoming 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah.
So
he would have had a good one with Texas. I think it was speculated, but he got hurt
before he got injured. And then Dante Dowell, you get as much time as you can at Oregon, but he was, a top 10 recruit in his recruiting class, I think a couple of years ago. So he's definitely a highly touted running back. He's got a couple of years eligibility, 3 years, maybe 3 years of eligibility left. So just much needed depth for that running back room. Cause as we saw, you lose 2 running backs in one game and, it's the Northern Illinois game. So it's like immediately you have to play, the next 7-8 games with freshman running backs and, and all of that. So I think it's just much needed depth. And, who knows if he'll be the starter going forward, but I think, just much needed depth from the transfer side that Nebraska got. They got a couple of offensive lineman transfers, the one from Florida, most notably, for sure. So just a lot of, and I think that's what Matt Rule wants to do going forward with the portal as well. I think he's just going to use it more as, either as needed pieces or kind of depth fillers. I don't think, he doesn't want to build the entire team off of just transfer portal players. And
what do you mean? It worked so well for Colorado last year. Yes, I know that they beat us.
But I think I saw a tweet a couple of days ago. I think, with these transfer portal additions, I think since last year, I think Rule has flipped about 70 roster spots just from coming on from last year. So it's incredible. Nebraska still won 5 games last year. Pissed off that. Easily could have won 7, 8 of those games. The offense had just been a little bit more competent, but that was our Nebraska nugget for at least latest football editions.
I think something else that's key to note, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it could be speculated that he's the co-offensive coordinator.
Yes.
Which makes me think that if Satterfield doesn't work out as offensive coordinator, that Glenn Thomas could take over, or at least could be the offensive coordinator going forward if they get rid of Satterfield.
Interim guy.
Yeah, either interim or we try him for a year until we find the guy that we want or whatever, which I don't hate because, not that the Steelers offense was anything to write home about, but being an offensive analyst in the NFL has to mean something.
Right.
And I think you already touched on this, Andy, but I think another key is also that now we're going to have a dedicated quarterback coach.
Yes.
Which, along with bringing in Dylan Raiola and all these other transfer pieces and everything that's coming together, on paper,
it looks good.
On paper, all the changes that we've made this offseason, I think Rule is building. I think it kind of goes back to what we said. Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what we all said on the last Nebraska Abilities, which is you can't build a house without the foundation. And I think last year we set a really good foundation, and now we're just building upon that. And I think I granted, of course, we're Nebraska fans at heart, so of course, every year we're off-season champions 10 years in a row at this point.
But I mean, like this off season though.
Either Rule is the greatest salesman in the world, which is totally possible.
100% possible.
or this next year is going to be something special. And I only say that as in like I could see us winning 7-8 games next year, making a bowl game, seeing that progress that we've been so like. I think a lot of us are at least into the point of being realistic that Nebraska could actually compete. And the thing is we have other teams that are coming into the Big Ten that have never played Big Ten style football, or I shouldn't say never, but haven't really had to play much in terms of like a full onslaught of Big Ten football.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, USC and UCLA will probably be okay, but there's no guarantee of that either. There's nothing saying that they're going to come in and smoke us either. It's
right.
We'll just have to see.
And that's my biggest thing and I'll be super intrigued is obviously we're all interested to see how the offense looks next year. I'm almost wondering if they're going to probably try to set it up the ways they kind of try to set it up this year I think Satterfield is probably going to take what he wanted to do with Jeff Sims and just try to do it with Dylan. And then he never got that chance because, Jeff Sims was Jeff Sims. But I wouldn't be surprised. Right. I mean, they had to do so much adapting, but I wouldn't be surprised if like what we see next year is probably what they wanted to do last year with, a competent quarterback and a competent offense. And then, you have to adjust and run the option, halfway through the season. But my gut feeling is what they wanted to do last year with Jeff Sims is probably what they're going to want to do this year with Dylan is kind of set up just the same passing offense as what Nebraska, like what Rule wants to do. I know he loves to run the ball, but I mean, you can't, especially with, you have this great recruit and prospect in Dylan is you're going to want to throw the ball. And now you're bringing in these portal additions at receiver. Plus you've got, our young freshmen, Malachi, Jaden Doss, Jaden Loy, you have all these big upcoming freshmen that had to step up last year, and they did. So, yeah, it's I think that's my Nebraska nugget for the NCAA football news.
All right, well, let's move over to the NBA.
This is going to be a Nate segment.
This is 100% going to be a Nate thing.
100. We don't even have to talk about our teams the rest of the year. This should be NBA in parentheses Nate's segment.
Hey, the Wolves are back. That's all you need to know. Number 2 team in the NBA, number 1 in the West, number 1 defensive rating in the NBA, number 1 in our hearts.
Who's the number 1 team in the NBA?
The Celtics.
Are they really?
Yeah.
I haven't even paid any attention.
They've split the series against the Celtics, and both games have gone to overtime. The Timberwolves won in Minnesota, and the Celtics won in Boston. So, if everything goes right, could be shaping up for a fun season there. But yeah, this is like the best season the Timberwolves have had in a while. Their seasons, they're 29-11 so far, and there are seasons where they didn't even win 20 games. So we are taking every little victory that we can out of this. Yeah, that's about all I got. Anthony Edwards is an all-star. Rudy Gobert is making a run for Defensive Player of the Year.
The Wolves this year are having similar of a trajectory to like what the Suns were having a couple of years ago, where I could see the Wolves being the team that makes that run. That they are like the definitive team. Now, granted, hopefully they actually finish in the finals and beat whoever they play. Probably the Celtics, is from what it sounds like. But yeah, to me, so Nate is obviously the Wolves fan. I'm a Suns fan, and Andy's an Alex Caruso fan.
I am a team that whoever Alex Caruso is playing on, that is the team I cheer for. And the past 2 years, it's been 2 or 3. Well, either one, but he's on the Bulls right now. So, yeah, at least I guess our segments will be short, Zach, because our teams are not good this year.
Hey, the Suns are on the come up now that they finally got their big 3 kind of going through their rotations, and the injuries are starting to fall off, and they're getting that was the key. Like from the Suns standpoint, from a Suns fan standpoint, that was the issue at the beginning of the year, and still kind of is like Booker was hurt and Bradley Beal was hurt. Kevin Durant was the one that was like consistently playing and was playing out of his mind, and just the rest of the team. The Suns, their whole offseason was weird, and you know, it was good because we got who was it? Frank Vogel is the head coach.
Yep.
Which I liked that. I was good with that. I didn't think Monty was a bad coach by any means, but I was like, it's time to get to that next level. This happened last year, but they had the whole new ownership take over, which is also good. I think he's been doing really good stuff there. Yeah, it's been a hard start. It's been a very cold start for the Suns, just because they haven't been able to get their big guys, their big names in for rotations. But that said, as a Suns fan, I think my favorite person to watch on the few games that I have seen so far is it Nurkic? I never quite pronounce his name, but that guy, he plays hard. So, and after watching,
gives you a little more effort than Ayton.
Yeah, that was, which is crazy because Ayton still could have been easily one of the best centers in the league, and just
100%.
And I mean, you see it now because he's with the Pacers.
He's with the Blazers.
Blazers. Okay,
yeah.
It's like he just seems like he's not trying there either. I guess he just doesn't have that fifth gear or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Outside, I mean, the NBA, it's not really just starting, but I mean, it's in the middle of the season. Not a whole heck of a lot's really happening outside of Nate's team going off.
Yeah, so we got the trade deadline will be coming up in another month or so, and things.
We forget about the Lakers winning their first inaugural in-season tournament.
Wow!
I mean, another ring for LeBron to wear.
So, like the Mavericks. So I was looking at like some lines and some scores and whatnot beforehand, and I saw that the Mavericks and the Lakers are playing, and the Mavericks have like the better overall record, and like they, I think, look better on paper, and yet the Lakers were a 3-point favorite. I was like, that seems high. Not that the Lakers are bad, and not that the Mavericks are like the greatest team in the world, but it's like, what? And I guess I'm assuming it's in LA, but
yes,
it's like, I don't know, because like I know like in football, you're like the home team is generally given, what is it, like 3 points? It kind of like the home team advantage is -3 or whatever. So if you have, so like I didn't know if it was similar to that in basketball. I have no idea, but I just was like, I know 3 points isn't the same as it is in football, but like still 3 points just seemed like a lot. I would expect like 1.5, but I don't know betting lines. So,
and then I forgot. I mean, this happened earlier in the season, but one of my favorite storylines was Draymond's indefinite suspension,
which is now like coming to an end.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, I
dumbest headline was that he put Rudy Gobert in a chokehold and Rudy got fined for it.
The stuff. Did you?
Draymond just loves to do that. Like every time I see a headline about Draymond, I go, "All right, what did he do?" It's obviously something stupid.
See, and the best part is you can always just be like Draymond Green. It's like, okay, how did he physically assault somebody on the court?
Right.
And the weird thing is, it's only on the court. Like I don't think he has any issues out in public. It's when he's playing basketball. It's
not like Jamal Murray or not John Morant with his Instagram live gun videos. Yeah, those are off-court issues. Draymond just loves to do all his on-court issues.
Could you imagine?
And then the game that John Morant came back, what did he drop? 50?
Yeah, and then like 2 games later, he's
out for the
his
season.
shoulder.
Yeah. NBA. I will give NBA, even if you don't follow it, if you have like any inkling of online NBA Twitter, that is like tiers above NFL Twitter. I think NBA Twitter is just its own universe.
Yes.
And then like you have your NFL Twitter, everybody's in NFL Twitter, but like NBA Twitter is just it's its own breed. It's a whole different breed.
It's so good though. It's so good. I think going back to the Draymond Green thing though, like I think my favorite there had to be like there was some article that came out where Draymond was like he had to talk, like Adam Silver had to talk him out of retirement. It's like my dude, like I've personally have never had a problem being able to look in the mirror and be like, "Yep, that's me." But apparently he does. It's like, my guy,
Right.
come on.
And it's, I mean,
At that point, you got to just say like, "I am the problem."
that's kind of like the whole thing with the Warriors now. Definitely, the Warriors are down on that downward trend, but it's weird to see. Like, probably most of our high school, college years of watching the NBA was just always the Warriors and whoever else. And now you just kind of see it's just kind of slowly dwindling between Steph and Clay. And, they're obviously still good players, but the Warriors have just once this dominating, dynasty that just couldn't stop winning is now just dwindling before our eyes. But,
that's kind of the same thing. That's the same thing back to like Saban and everything though, too. It's like now all these coaches and these players that we've grown up throughout high school and college watching are all retiring or going to do something different. It's like, what is like, we don't want to admit it. We don't want to admit it, but we're officially getting old now. It's like,
right.
I didn't want to have to go there, but here we are.
Well, I don't have any more NBA news. I
guess the only other thing that was of note, how do you say this guy's last name?
Siakam.
Paul.
Siakam.
Going to the Pacers for 3 firsts and 2 role players. So,
I mean, Pacers are Tyrese Halliburton, man. I remember Zach. I remember draft night. 3 years ago?
Wasn't he on the Kings?
He was because we were talking about. We were surprised that he dropped that far, and then
the Suns had a premier chance to get Tyrese Halliburton, who everybody people were like, oh, like we should get him. Because at that time, I think Chris Paul was still on the team, and it's like Chris Paul can then retire, or at least, you can trade your point guards back and forth. No, they didn't do that.
Yep. And the Kings already had De'Aaron Fox. So they didn't need another point guard.
But I think, and we had talked about that at that time too, and it was like, and Tyrese Halliburton was supposed to go like super high. Like even the people like covering it on ESPN and whatnot were like, yo, how has he fallen this far?
Yep.
And it's like you when you have a talented player like that, even if you don't necessarily need him, especially in basketball, like, I mean, in football, it's one thing because there's so many other positions that your team might need where you might not need another quarterback. Not every team needs a Caleb Williams next year.
Yeah, I would love a Caleb Williams.
Try to get a Caleb Williams, but they aren't going to get him. Exactly.
I would love a quarterback that my coach doesn't hate. That'd also be nice.
Well, who knows how that will go. But like in basketball, you can work those into rotations. Like, the sport's a lot quicker and it works a lot different. I think I'm not going to assume I'm a pro at this, but yeah, I guess. So, I mean, the Pacers could be a real threat going forward.
Yeah.
They're not bad by any means now. Yeah. They're just
not the Bulls.
Not
the Suns. I think they're only 5 games away from 500, but they, they are what they are. They decided to run the same team back from last year that didn't make it out of the play-in game. So, like, maybe this will work again. And here they are at 19 and 23. Like, maybe it didn't really work.
If the Suns can avoid a play-in game, I don't think they necessarily be bad at the play-in game. It's just, it's more. But if they can avoid the play-in game, that'd be huge.
Right.
I think they could make a good playoff run. I don't know if they could beat the Wolves. I don't know.
No.
They're at that point yet. No. Nate just definitively, no, they can't.
No, I think they would definitely give them a run for their money. And I mean, Kevin Durant's one of the best players on the planet for a reason. So I think they played earlier in the season. I think the Suns won. So, I mean.
Oh, that's right. Because you and I were texting back and forth, and Nate was like, well, congrats to the Suns. And like, it was just like 2 p.m. here. And like the game had definitely not started. And you were just like, oh, congrats to the Suns because the Timberwolves they have to drop one. They've won like 5 in a row or whatever. I'm like, oh, the Suns will collapse. And then they didn't. I'm like, oh.
Nate, do you think by February 6th that the Timberwolves will rest all their starters when they play the Bulls?
Oh.
or is the March 31st game more likely? How about you do it for both? How about you spot us
could
10
just-
points and we'll see what
Alex could
happens.
just come over to the Timberwolves on a friendly
It's-
contract.
The issue is, even at this point, if the Bulls do make a trade, if Alex is part of a trade, I mean, he's going to get a lot of value out of it. It's like, which team is willing to give up a big potential piece? Because I think if he does get traded, he's probably going to go to a playoff contending team just because of what he brings to the defensive side of the ball, and a team that probably needs a defensive piece kind of to make their push either in the playoffs or solidify their playoffs will probably make that trade happen. But I think the biggest thing right now is Levine probably will, if there is any sort of trade, I think it's going to be for Levine.
Yeah.
Because you would think DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, two great scorers, would work together, and it does, and then it doesn't at the same time. But yeah, I think if Alex does get traded, the teams are probably going to have to give up some hefty options or some draft picks and some money, because he's now grown to a point where, like, he was all first team NBA defensive team last year, and that's an incredible honor to get, but it's just, you skyrocket your value at that point too. And he does it every single night. He loves to throw his body around, and that's why he gets in. That's why that's why he gets injured so much. He literally just throws and dives on every single ball, and it's like, well, yeah, no wonder why you have a tweaked ankle and a tweaked wrist every other game. It's you're diving for everything.
He's playing the wrong sport,
right?
Put some pads on that boy.
But yeah, if we want to transition to some NCAA basketball news, so
I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to either. Last week was a lot more fun if we had talked last week.
Well, hey, we did try.
We did try.
Someone was sick.
So we'll rip the Band-Aid right off. If you were wondering, Nebraska did lose tonight to the worst Big Ten team right now. So
in overtime.
So super, super fun about that. But I mean, Nebraska, I'll focus on Nebraska ball right now. They have a lot going for them. This is obviously one of the best teams Fred has had since he's here. The best start they've had under Fred, and the best start to the Big Ten probably since, I think they said 2014, 2015. That team that did go to the NCAA tournament. But you come off the euphoric knocking off the number one team Purdue last weekend, did it in convincing fashion at home. Then you go to Iowa on Friday, drop an absolute dud. You go to Rutgers tonight, and lose in heartbreaking fashion after having two 12-point leads, and lose to a team that was 1-4 in the Big Ten. Now Nebraska sits at, I think, 13-5 overall, 3-4 in the Big Ten. All four of those Big Ten losses have been on the road. But that just doesn't go for Nebraska. I think if you look at every Big Ten team right now, I think all of their conference losses have probably been on the road. So no one is safe when you go on the road in the Big Ten. And I think that's the same with college basketball itself. I mean, last week we saw a span of 6-7 top 10 teams all get knocked off. And now, UConn played tonight and they kicked the crap out of Creighton. UConn's the new number one team, and it was like 62-48 or something, I think was the final score. But they're the new number one team now, and goes to show from the reigning national champs. But college basketball is weird every year, and I think it's that's why we love March Madness. It's why we love college basketball, because you can be number one for so long. And I think they showed a graphic during that game too. I think there's been 6 or 7 different number one teams this year, and we're halfway through the season. So it's just anything can happen with basketball. But yeah, if Nebraska ball, if they continue this trend, maybe best looking at it in NIT right now. They're definitely going to have to pick up a lot more games. And Rutgers is a quad 2 loss, so it doesn't hurt their resume in terms of quad 3, quad 4 losses, but definitely stings right now. And if they keep dropping games like these, you are not making the NCAA tournament. They're definitely gonna have to string more of these, just getting a little bit of a run like they did at the end of last season, but just start it now at the same time. Because you look at that Purdue game, and defense won on that game, And then tonight and against Iowa, it's just defense was non-existent. And we even go for the Wisconsin game too, that they lost a couple weeks ago, is defense is just non-existent. So I think it definitely is a team that lives and dies by how well they play on defense, because we know they could score. I mean, when they take the shots they should take, not like Rank Mass throwing up threes. He can make the threes, but not my preferred 3-point shot. If I had to be honest, from anybody on the team, I would love, your best 3-point shooter, Keisei Tominaga, shooting the 3, or Bryce Williams, when I guess he is making shots. Jamarcus Lawrence has not been good this year. I think he's taken a step back from what was a promising freshman year last year. But yeah, it's just Nebraska just loves to do some groin kicks, and we'll have to look going forward. Potential huge injury news that Juwan Gary left the second half with a non-contact injury, and if you know anything about non-contact injuries, usually not the best ones to have. I guess the only exception would be Nick Chubb having a contact injury, but you got his leg destroyed.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Thanks for that memory.
Yeah, that one was definitely a contact injury that should have been way worse than it was.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like when they came out and said, "Oh, this is what it is," because I think it was like a sprained MC or like ACL tear.
Yeah, and they're like, everybody's like, "There's no
I was
way."
like, are we sure? I am not a doctor. I'll admit that. However, legs don't bend that way.
Right.
No.
And Juwan Gary tore his ACL last year, and I forgot which leg it was, but I'm going to assume until we get more that it's probably going to be the same leg, same knee that he tore again tonight. Because they showed him walking off the court, he couldn't put any leg on or putting any weight on his leg. He was emotionally distraught and crying on one of the staff members' shoulders. So probably a good giveaway tell right now that it probably is similar, and he knows that it's probably the season-ending injury again for him. So another mid-season groin injury kick for Nebraska that we love to endure. Yeah,
we should probably cheer for teams that don't kick us in the nuts constantly.
That's
just a suggestion.
I've always had that thought too, of like, if I was born somewhere else in like a good sports town, good sports team, I'd be like, what's their lives like? Like, do they have the same emotional gripes like college talk shows hosts? Like, do they have the same gripes that we do? And it's like, what's that fantasy life like for them? Like, what's it like being an Alabama fan that you lose one game, it's the end of the world, but you win the other 11. So like, what's it like to complain about that?
Hopefully we'll learn sooner than later.
Right.
Hopefully.
But that's my NCAA news. I guess
I think the other big headline that I saw, and I'm just, as I was looking through like ESPN and stuff today, John Calipari reached his 400th victory with Kentucky, which I don't think should be terribly surprising. He's been there forever and a day.
Yep.
So, I mean, good for him. That's still impressive. I mean, nobody can say that that's not, but, but I mean, when I saw that it was I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. I mean, I know 400 is a lot, but I was also like, that's it. I felt like I feel like he's been there so long to the point where it's like, I feel like that number should be bigger. But then as I'm like thinking through my head, like, no, that makes sense. It's probably that's pretty good.
I mean, if you look, just compare that to Coach K, who won 1,200 games. So,
and maybe that's why my number is just inflated at a point where it's like, oh, well,
like 400 for a college football coach, absolutely incredible when you only play 12 games a season. Now with basketball, you have the potential to win 30 plus games every season. So
you can get to 400 a lot quicker that way.
Then yes, 400 college football, incredible.
Yeah. Let's see. Doesn't
especially
seem like
when you're coaching guys like John Wall and Derrick Rose.
It turns out when you have good players.
Marcus Camby back in the day.
There's a name
for a while.
Wow.
One of my favorite things that I see on Twitter from time to time is like, just based off that point Nate made, is like, guys can just sit around and just start naming like old sports players and just have the best time and be like, oh, I remember that guy like so long ago. It's like, where did like the names that we just have ingrained in the back of our brains that we can just pull out at any point. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that guy, or like I remember that play from this game, back in 2010. It's like these things are just stored so far in the back of our brain that we just have the ability just to pull them out at any point.
It's almost like a repressed memory, but not in a bad way. Not in a bad way.
Not in a bad way.
Like, well, I guess it depends on the play and how it affected you, I guess. But like, I can say one phrase right now that's going to give us all PTSD, and that's 1 second. But beside the point.
Which got brought back up when Texas in the Washington game.
Yeah.
From the playoff.
I was
thankfully, Texas got their karma back on that one.
Mm-hmm.
It only took over a decade?
and didn't really benefit us, but that's okay.
No.
It made me feel good.
I think I sent you guys a screenshot of my Twitter timeline when that happened, and everybody's timeline was the old Mac Brown 1 second picture. Like every person I followed was just tweeting out that picture.
It is still relatively unfair, in my opinion, that somehow Texas is now back compared to us.
And they're just as interesting. I mean, just goes with basketball and football too, is we'll see how they transfer into a new conference. The SEC obviously is not what I would think of as a basketball conference, but I mean, you still have Kentucky when they're running going through there. But I mean, it's interesting just to see all the sports go through. Definitely baseball. I mean, you think about baseball in the SEC. I mean, that's a gauntlet to go through going in. So I don't expect Oklahoma or Texas to do quite as well. Texas is definitely a powerhouse baseball team too, program. So, now you got to go through LSU and Vanderbilt and all those teams just to even get to the College World Series again. So that's going to be interesting from at least a college baseball perspective of how they do there. Because that's a gauntlet I'm glad Nebraska doesn't have to go through for baseball. I'll take my mid-tier Big Ten in baseball and leave it.
Man, we gotta start talking about baseball though, because with the weather the way it has been the past week here in Nebraska, it's
too cold.
It's like, come on now, like baseball is spring weather. Like,
Nebraska probably have a home game.
It was 60 degrees here today. Just got to move states.
Nebraska's probably gonna have a home game here in a couple months. For baseball.
I don't know. At the rate that it's going outside, I doubt it.
March 8th is their first home game. For baseball.
Good luck with that.
Good luck.
Against South Alabama.
If Nebraska winter this year has, well, I shouldn't say this year, but if Nebraska winters have taught me anything, is that's not going to be over until like May.
That's what I've always I know baseball has to go and kind of coincide with like the college schedule, but it's always baffled me. It's like, by the time you get to the middle of June, like college baseball is over, and Major League Baseball just has like four more months of baseball. So I've always wondered, like, is college baseball able to kind of push that out to like they get more summer months and just get some more, like, you get teams like us where Nebraska has to go play their first month and a half schedule out on the West Coast where it's warmer and play these tournaments and these other teams that are out on the West Coast or on the South, because you can't play them here because it's going to be 20 degrees and snow. Even in March it's probably still going to be 20 degrees, but you take the chance because you got to start playing games at home at the same time.
They should just go like the backyard baseball route and just start playing in people's backyards and like parking lots and stuff.
Would love that.
Like if you hit the wall, which is actually like the building that's next door to the baseball field that you're on, that's like a home run. Like, come on. The answer is obviously right there.
Right.
Just look at
I think Minnesota plays indoors for baseball. I think. So it's smart of them. There's no way they'd be able to play baseball in Minnesota until past April. and decent weather.
And that's still even a maybe.
Right.
Like just the way winter goes anymore, it seems.
Right. Well, I think you transfer that to our quick MLB quick hitting note. If Dodgers are cheaters. That's all I know. They somehow finesse the best player in Major League Baseball to defer all of his money to the end of his contract year.
Yep.
So they don't hit the luxury tax. Like, how is that legal? How is MLB baseball legal in that sense?
Money is fake. in the MLB.
And I know they got a couple other big player names that I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know they're getting away with it, and it sucks.
Yep.
But what gives me hope is that they're gonna choke in the playoffs every year like they always do.
It's the same argument that, people had for Michigan is like, yeah, they could have been stealing signs and stuff, but they still had to go out and execute it. So
right.
Yeah.
We'll see how they do.
I think my thing that I'll miss the most about Shohei being on the Angels is those tweets that are old as time is, yeah, Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani went, 6 or 7 with 2 home runs and 7 runs batted in, and the Angels lose 9-7.
Yeah, like something that hasn't been done since the 1930s.
Yeah.
The Angels still lose.
Like, oh yeah, they probably won by 4 or 5 runs. Like, nope, they still lost. I'm gonna miss those tweets though, because those were old and classic. Because just typical Angels. But yeah, Shohei
Now
now
they'll just transfer to the Dodgers.
God,
I hope so.
as if the Dodgers didn't rip my hearts out enough by taking Mookie Betts away from me, but. It is what it is.
I'm so detached from baseball, which I'm hoping to fix this year. But I'm so detached from baseball that for 2 months, I didn't believe that Mookie Betts was a real name, and I thought people were playing pranks on me. And I was like, no, that's not a thing.
Zach, he was everything I wanted in a franchise player, and the Red Sox let him go.
Yep.
Isn't that kind of like your guys' MO though?
Yes, it is, because they just. It just happened with Alex Verdugo. We sent him to the Yankees of all teams.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I know they've gotten a few players in return this season, but these guys. We finally got rid of Chris Sale, which I'm actually happy about. Because outside of the 2018 World Series team, Chris Sale has not been healthy enough to play a full season of baseball. So the Braves will get to deal with that.
Didn't he crash his bike? Was it last year when he crashed his bike?
Yeah, and then he's had Tommy John before, and it's just dude will play 2 full games, and then the third game he'll come out. They'll take him out in the second inning because he can't throw anymore. It's like, oh, Chris Sale's done for the year. So I'm glad the Red Sox don't have to deal with that anymore.
You know what? I can't blame baseball players when they have to play 4,000 games a season. Yeah. I mean, we could sit here and make fun of NBA players and their load management and everything, but come on, 160 or whatever games it is this season.
And Shohei's not going to pitch this season. They haven't confirmed that he's gone under surgery, but we probably all know that he's gone under some sort of Tommy John or elbow surgery at this point, which I knew that dream fantasy of having the best 2-way player do both and be really good at both was not going to last very long. Because it's one of them's going to take a toll on the other, and it was more likely the pitching one, which it has taken a toll already. So I think they've already confirmed he won't pitch at all in the 2024 season. Maybe 2025 he will, but I mean, I think you keep him as he's so much of a better hitter, I think, than he is a pitcher. And that with the NL having a DH spot, I mean, just put him in as DH and have a stacked loaded lineup like they always do, and then I'll wait for them to choke and play off Kershaw to show up, which he always does. Also great. But yeah,
I don't think there's much else right now.
Much else. I've griped as much about Nebraska ball as I could. I could go on. I could go on longer, but
it's all right. We've got next week. We can gripe more next week. Well, next week
something stupid's going to happen between now and next week.
We got the Northwestern game Saturday with a bunch of alumni coming back.
That will probably in a horrific fashion lose that game too, because it always happens.
Yep.
Is Northwestern just like Nebraska's kryptonite in terms of sports?
Probably. I mean, Northwestern beat Purdue this year too, so they're no slouch. I mean, no Big Ten team is a slouch, clearly. But I guess women's athletics wise, I know Nebraska women's basketball won tonight. I think they're up to 13-5 now. I don't want to look that up, but I know Amy Williams is always good with her teams. They'll probably make another run at the tournament again, assuming again if they're on the same trajectory as they always are. But they're doing well. They're on a roll. Volleyball added a couple transfers. The one from Minnesota,
one from San Diego, right?
Yes. And then Badenhorst left, which was no surprise. I assumed one of them between like her and Krause were going to go because Badenhorst took over after Krause got injured. Now with Krause staying more than likely and her probably coming back healthy on top of the transfers, I'd imagine Badenhorst was going to see much more playing time unless another injury happened. So
Yeah.
that one, I'm not really surprised that she transferred out. But yeah, volleyball, John Cook is always going to do what John Cook does. Is they'll just come back more stacked for another
I
It
think
was,
that's-
it was a rebuilding year this year, and we were the national runner-up. So.
Right.
I think that's kind of the other thing, though, too, is I saw a lot of people like, I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was Batenhorst, but like where people were like really sad that she was leaving. But it's like there was probably logistical good reason behind it, but also John Cook has been a good enough coach through the past, however many years officially. At this point, like if something happens, you can't really question it because Nebraska volleyball is almost always going to show up. And I say almost always because, volleyball is another sport just similar to like basketball where, even if they do go undefeated, there's no guarantee that you're going to win the next one. So, I mean, at this point, players transferring out, if anything, it's full faith in whatever John Cook does because he's got it figured out.
Someone has to say it. She was dating a Creighton basketball player, so
she was dating.
Have to question her loyalty,
or is I think she still currently is
Probably.
dating Baylor Shireman.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean that one doesn't really surprise me that she left. But
which speaking of Shireman, when I was watching the game earlier before we started recording, he was not playing so well. I think my favorite
nobody on Creighton was, but
right, but like he may have fixed that. But I think my favorite, like when I was watching it, there was a graphic at the bottom, and it was like he was 1 for 7, and it said right underneath it has missed the last 6 shots. I'm like, yeah, that indeed is how math works. But then I thought about it. I'm like, well, he made his first one and then hasn't made anything since. And I was like, oh, that's probably worse. Yeah. That's worse. But I was like, well, no, duh. But then I was like, yeah. It's like, 1 and 7 is not good. That's how I shot in high school. Which is why I didn't play.
That's how I start in 2K in all my games. Start out hot and then just downward. Just when you first start your My Career guy, when he's like no stats, you make your first overall. 60 overall. Like you make your first shot, and then as the game goes on, you get more tired. It's like every shot you go up is like, nope, not even close.
Ooh, speaking of video games,
no.
So supposedly this is completely, this is sports related.
So many different things. I don't know what to believe anymore.
I know, but so supposedly, what was it? July 12th was supposed to be the release date for the new college football game. That has since been debunked, but it is still officially coming out this summer. What's driving me nuts though, and I mean, it's been long enough since. Well, it'll be basically a decade. It's going to be a decade then since the last one came out. I still want to see gameplay because my guess is it's going to be.
We haven't seen gameplay at all.
It's going to be
reskin.
I think it's going to be reskinned Madden with just extra features built on top of it. Which, if anybody has followed Madden for the past 10 years, features built on top of it is something Madden doesn't do anymore.
Nope.
So I'll be curious how that works out. But no gameplay, and they keep saying, "Oh, it's coming out this summer." Like when? I mean, I feel like at this point, if we don't hear something by like the beginning of February, I'm gonna be like, I don't believe this is still a thing.
Yeah.
But who knows? We might have a college football game this summer to finally play. I hope.
Maybe.
I hope. It's been a long time since I've actually sat down and played sports games.
Like,
but man,
they don't need to market it, but a trailer would be nice.
It would be nice to see something.
Not
let us know something is like happening.
Not only that, they had the prime time to be like, hey, like if nothing else, just to be like, hey, remember like when we said this like a few years ago, like this was a thing. It's still a thing. Like just even if it's a graphic, like coming summer 2024, like just
don't even have to get specific. Just put a picture up and be like, don't worry, we're still here.
They had the prime time to do it. They had the prime time to do it in the national championship game. And granted, that was the big rumor was that it was supposed to there was supposed to be a trailer, and then That one was another one that got ran away with. And now,
Mhm.
I mean, at this point, I won't be surprised if they just like drop a trailer randomly and then just let like Twitter run with it. Be like, oh, guys, look at it, like, new college football game. And then that's what has the date. But I feel like we should have heard something about it by now.
You would think.
I'm getting worried.
So am I.
I admittedly have been worried since like EA was like, we're going to make a college football game. I'm like, you're just going to do like, cause this all happened like once NIL became a thing. And so now it's like, so it's just going to be Madden, but with college teams on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't play enough Madden to really be a talking head with it, but man,
I've tried to, and it's not my favorite experience with a video game.
I mean, I played Madden back in like 6th grade, and I loved it then.
Yep.
But like, I was not playing it in simulation.
Installments.
Yeah, I think it's agreed upon that like the last good one was like Madden 12 or something.
Yeah.
Which has been, I don't know if I'm not great at
little
math,
bit.
but that's been a while ago. So who knows? That'll be something that we'll have to follow.
Yep.
But I don't have anything else. You guys?
Nope.
Nope.
Wolf's still back. Nas Reed.
Right
Yes.
on.
Yeah. I mean, next week we'll talk about. Obviously, we'll have another round of playoffs under our belts for the NFL. We'll see who goes to the conference championships. Who knows what Nebraska ball will do this weekend? I'll be happy or still very much sad.
Nothing
Things
great
are
for our
going.
health.
Yeah, nothing great for our health. And then we'll see just what other big coaching changes, news kind of comes out within the next week or so, and any other big story headlines. And I think that's what we're going to try to set it up to where, we're going to touch on big sports headlines, big sports stories. And then, obviously if our listeners have any weird nuggets, headlines that they see come across, want to share it, send it to us. So get our takes on it. We will appreciate any of that as well. I love finding weird, like the quirky Jim Irsay story that happened today. Like weird things like that just come out of nowhere. It's like, okay.
Well, I know we were talking before we started recording too. Like we're definitely going to cut. Like we have to cover like weird sports too. I know I made the joke at the beginning, like, oh, we're not going to cover lacrosse, but like I went with
if
my
a
wife
weird thing
last
happens,
night. We watched the movie The Boys in the Boat, which is about the 1936 rowing champion that went to the Olympics.
Yeah. The
Very good movie.
New George Clooney movie. Yeah.
Yes, good movie, but also like I am 100% gonna start watching rowing now because it was so intense. I was like, this is awesome. I'm gonna start watching this, so I'll start talking about that.
Good thing the Olympics are this summer.
Yeah. And although I don't know if we can talk about rowing because there's no ball.
Well, no.
No. No.
I don't know if you want to go there.
No.
In men's rowing, there is. Anyway, yeah. So we're gonna get wild and weird with it. So
And who knows if every podcast is going to be this long? I guess it just depends on what we have to talk about. But yeah, we'll take any suggestions of what you want, our takes on what you want to hear about. If you weird, quirky sports stories, weird videos that y'all find, send them our way. We'll react and see if they make us laugh or not.
That's the other thing too, is we're still working on format. I know this is the administrative side of things, but I know if you've seen our Facebook post of kind of the announcement of Sportsball and whatnot, it's this kind of an ongoing thing. So we might not even do the same thing next week. We don't know yet. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
It's kind of a building thing. So with that, unless you guys have anything else, I figure we can call it our first episode of Sportsball. And we want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting us for the past couple of years, allowing us to get the confidence and build upon it even more. And unfortunately, we don't get to continue with the, Nebraska ability possibility. It's a Nebraska ability thing, but I guess
it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, it was fun while it lasted. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.